Hello everyone, welcome back to Rolling Solo. My name is Adam Smith and I'm excited today to be announcing the next Kickstarter preview series coming to the channel very soon, and that is for a game called Oathsworn Into the Deepwood. And this is a Kickstarter that is landing in early October. If you're looking for the date of that Kickstarter launch, you'll find it in the description below. The designer of Oathsworn is Jamie Jolly and the publisher of this game is Shadowborne Games. And you might be wondering, what exactly does this video have for you in terms of content? Well, the aim of this video is going to be something different than what I've done with previous Kickstarter previews in the past. I thought it would be interesting, being that in a typical Kickstarter prototype that's sent in order to show you guys what a game is all about, normally I'm jumping straight into the playthrough and you may not get a chance to see all the components inside that playthrough that that game has to offer. So what I'm going to be doing is walking through a number of the different components here, kind of in the same vein as I would do an unboxing. So we're not going to be going into depths as to what we're looking at, but I'm going to show you the different cards, the dice, the miniatures, the maps, the things that I received as part of the prototype that are going to help you have a general understanding of what is available to me when we move into the playthrough. Again, remember, with these Kickstarter previews, these are a snapshot of the game. They're never a full picture of what's really going to be at your disposal when the game is finalized. And again, everything you see here in this is subject to change. That includes artwork, gameplay. It also includes, of course, the component quality itself. The miniatures are going to be cast differently. The actual card stock itself and all that kind of stuff is going to change. So again, take all of that stuff with a grain of salt, because this is all just meant to be able to show you guys how the game actually plays. So without further ado, let's go through each of the different items that I received as part of the Kickstarter prototype. And the first one is staring at us right in the face, and that is the City of Bastogne. And this is actually a really cool looking map. First off, you got the beautiful artwork around the outside. One of the things, or one of the caveats I'd like to mention in terms of maps, and this is also something that's important for a number of other items in the game, like monsters, puzzles, and unlocks, things like that. Some of this stuff is stored away in these secretive locked boxes inside the final version. So you're not just going to have access to everything when you begin Oathsworn. You're going to have things that are going to open up and unlock as you progress through the story. So that's a really important thing to note, because there's other maps that you're going to run into that you will not have access to from the beginning, and you will discover those and unveil them as you go through the story, which is pretty cool. You can see here you've got nodes everywhere all over this particular map. So there's obviously a whole bunch of different places to visit. During this particular Kickstarter preview coming up, we're going to be touching upon a few of these, as the story will take us through a couple different locations, but we surely won't be visiting everything here. But again, this gives you a rough idea of what the map layout looks for at least one of the cities. The next component we have here is the time track. So obviously we'll be keeping track of time here. And as you see, it moves across the time track and it's going to hit certain nodes on this time track that have us gaining extra tokens, city events, and extra unique items. It's also kind of cool to note in terms of the artwork on this particular time track, you can see the sun actually revolving around as you go down the time track, and day is passing into night. Next up are these 4 player decks. You'll see there's 4 different colors and they range from weakest to strongest, going in the following order: white, yellow, red, and then finally black. The highest result in each player deck is as follows: a 2 for the white, a 3 for the yellow, 4 for the red, and 5 for the black. Here is a look inside the white player deck. You can see here we've got 6 blanks, 6 ones, 3 twos, and then another set of 3 twos with the critical hit symbol around the 2. We'll talk more about that when we move into the Kickstarter preview. Next up is a look inside the yellow player deck. We have 3 ones, 6 blanks, 3 twos, 3 threes, and 3 critical threes. The red player deck consists of 5 blanks, 4 twos, 3 threes, 3 fours, and 3 critical fours. The black player deck consists of 6 blanks, 6 3s, 3 4s, and 3 5s that are critical. In addition to the player cards that you can choose to use when you're resolving or involved in a combat, you also have the option to instead use dice, or in combination with those cards, use dice. So that's where the strategy comes in on this game. We'll talk a lot more about that when the Kickstarter playthrough kicks off, but it's pretty interesting decision making as to whether or not you want to risk using dice if you're more heavily favored towards the luck or risk side of things, or if you want to mitigate some of that luck and risk by actually card counting, essentially from the player decks to know or to hopefully have better odds of pulling a higher hit card. So there's a balance that can be struck there, and there's also a risk reward, so it serves two different types of players, or a player who likes a balance of both. There was also one directional die which was included in the prototype. Also included was a universal bag of dice and markers and gems. They're going to be used throughout gameplay, which we'll see during the Kickstarter preview, but I highly suspect that these are just temporary markers and temporary gems and temporary dice to be used in specific situations during gameplay. Again, these are very, very likely to change in the final product. Now it's time to talk about the player boards inside of Oathsworn. These are the characters that are included in the prototype. We're starting off with the Warden here. First off, the artwork is phenomenal, and I love that it bleeds across the entirety of the player board and isn't hidden in any way or just blocked off to one section of the player board like so many other games do with their heroes. This is a very beautiful looking player board, even in its prototype form. What I really like as well is everything's just outlined in terms of where components should go gameplay wise. So your ability cards are mentioned here, your regen areas down here, might, defense, HP, it's all clearly marked and very easy to find even with the artwork there. The other thing that's really nice is the black background on the special ability. That's a nice touch because the special ability is different across all the different characters, so being able to not miss that piece, if it was transparent, you might lose a little bit of the wording there. One of the wording pieces that does get a little bit muddled is down here under the ability cards, and that one I would personally potentially black out as well behind it just to ensure that it's readable. But this is important because that can actually change per character, and we'll talk about something that you need to know about. But besides that, on top of the actual player board itself, there is one other thing, and that's these numerical values around the outside of the player board. There's mechanics involved. We'll talk about them when we get to the playthrough, about cooling cards down as you use them. So there's a mechanism that has you cooling cards around your player board on the outside of the player board as they move around until they finally come back into your hand. You can also strategically play cards into certain slots in the cooldown cycle that pushes the cards at a faster rate to get cards that are out of your hand back into your hand. This is a very strategic mechanism inside the game, and one of the things that makes it really unique and something that's exciting to look forward to in the playthrough. So that is the Warden, and if I flip the Warden over on the back side of this player board, you'll also note the beautiful artwork as well as a little bit about who this character is. Next up we have the Witch, and you can see again that the special ability is obviously different for this character, and the wording down below under the ability cards is also different. Those are the two major noticeable things to mention. You'll also notice that the symbols inside this regen area are different as well, but besides that, everything else is the same. So we'll go ahead and flip the Witch over to the opposite side so you can see the artwork over here as well as the story if you'd like to read her backstory. Next up we have the Priest. Again, icon is different, new special ability for him, and different text at the bottom there. Again, full color artwork across the actual player board itself. Flipping the Priest over to the opposite side, we see his backstory. The Exile is next, and the Exile has a different icon, special ability, and text below as mentioned. And on the back side of this card, we can find out more about the Exile's past. Next we have the Ranger, and again, special ability different, text down below, and icon changed up. This is a really beautiful one. Flipping this over to the other side, here is the backstory for the Ranger. And last but not least is the Warbear. And again, special ability, text, icons, all different. Flipping it over to the back side to reference the story of the Warbear. Now let's take an up-close look at the miniature for the Warden. If you choose to use this character, you can see the pose is extremely aggressive. I love this pose. And again, everything you're seeing here in terms of the actual miniature itself is subject to change. There is terrain here on the base itself, which is a nice touch, but I really do like the attention to detail on this one. Next up, we're going to take a look at the Witch here. The pose, again, very, very nice. One thing I am appreciating about the poses in all of these heroes, you'll see as I go along, is that they are very, very well chosen for the type of character that they are, and they're always seeming to be in an action pose, which then again just looks very epic on the table when they're involved in battles. Next up is the Priest, and you have to love a priest that is not only a priest by having a book chained to his neck, but also has a gigantic rock mace going on here, which is looking pretty devastating either way he goes. And again, some really nice detail in the back there with the chain links and some items hanging from his garbs there, which is pretty awesome. He looks pretty good. This might be one of my favorites actually out of the group. The Exile easily has one of the most dynamic poses of all of them. He's heavily running and leaning with his axes flailing in this particular pose. It looks really, really good. And I really like the attention to detail on that. If you were sitting him flat like so, he's arching forward, just pushing off of that back foot in kind of full swing with the one axe straight across horizontal, which would be pretty devastating. So again, very, very nice miniature all the way around. This is the Ranger, and the Ranger has one of the coolest poses of all of them, tippy-toeing down what looks to be like a vine or possibly sliding and shooting as she moves. A very, very cool looking pose. And hands down, the thickest, largest, and tallest of the heroes that come in the prototype is the Warbear. This is a menacing miniature. Look at the size of this axe. It is ridiculous. Double-bladed on both sides for wonderful action. Great detail down through the middle and on the boots and everything. Again, very aggressive pose, full attack swing. Looks absolutely awesome. Makes you want to play this particular character very, very badly. Next up, we have an unorganized pile of tokens. That is more my fault than anybody else's. I didn't go ahead and organize this for this particular shot, but essentially there's multiples of the same in here. This is a pile which represents status effects tokens mixed in with some combat tokens, tracker tokens. Of course, there's duplicates of many of these, so if you stack them all the way up, this would look a lot less menacing. And then you've got some effect tiles down here that I neatly stacked, and that's more so how you should do it. But again, you'll see here there's lots of duplication in what you're seeing in the pile, so it isn't an overwhelming amount of status tokens. There's about 4 or 5 per group type that I just mentioned. And here is one of the major encounter boards in the game. This is one of the encounter boards that we will be seeing as part of the Kickstarter playthrough. You'll notice there is a south symbol down here. Remember that directional die? That's where it's going to come in useful in this particular encounter board. So there's a south marker right here off screen to the bottom right, of course, southeast, east over there, northeast up top, north even further up, northwest over here, west over here, and then southwest down here. And again, the artwork is the major feature here, but there's still hex tiles buried in, but it still doesn't take away from a very gorgeous looking board. And again, this board is prototype, so it's going to change in the final version in terms of its make. And this, my friends, is the home of the Broodmother, a gigantic, massive rat that we're going to be dealing with during the Kickstarter playthrough. This thing, no joke, is the size of a softball in your hand. It is a huge scale miniature. You can see these smaller rats around it are much more normal for a regular size miniature in a board game that represents at least a creature at low level. And you can see the Broodmother just goes way up and over top of all of these little creatures. I'm going to go ahead and pick this thing up and bring it up close to the camera so you can really get an appreciation for the detail and the size of this monstrosity. So here is the miniature in my hand, if you want to call it in my hand. This gigantic tail waving in its face. You can see the detail there in the face is fantastic looking. The teeth, everything. The body all the way through. Down into the terrain below it, there are skulls and bones of the victims of this thing as it's ripped individuals limb from limb and just eaten them whole, most likely, and also fed them to the insane amount of, yikes, smaller rats, which just seem to want to piggyback on this individual running around. It's crazy, the detail on this thing, and it is absolutely massive. And I will try to put this in the palm of my hand in a second here, but trying to give you a good look at all sides of this miniature. It is humongous. And it certainly looks awesome. So if the encounters inside of Oathsworn are going to have these types of nemesis or big bosses to go up against, the game is truly going to be epic in scale for sure. This, again, I will try to hold this in the palm of my hand with the back of it in my hand to give you an idea of how big it is. This is what I meant by the size of a softball. Like, yes, there's a little bit of air in the middle there, but still, this thing, I got my hand around the whole thing all the way around, and it's still consuming my hand. It's ridiculous. And then, of course, for scale, picking up one of these things, absolutely tiny and just a regular rat miniature. Now, there's a couple different sculpts in here, so they're not all looking exactly the same, but some of them are the same. And again, they're going to be just pests inside of this encounter. Here are the two cards that are specific to the Broodmother, and of course, you'll notice that the borders around these cards are quite large. They're going to be cut to size in the final version. Again, this is a prototype, but I'm unable to cut them evenly, so I left them as is. But you can see here the Broodmother is considered large. That's not surprising at all. And it's got all the talk here in terms of what this thing's going to do to us. Its defense, the might, what it has in terms of the colors of the dice and the status cards it can use against us, the giant rats that are going to be coming after us. And then this is the most interesting part here in terms of the attack damage. So at the very beginning of the game, and again, I'm going off of memory here, we've got 6 on a die in every one of these spots: front, core, flank, and rear. And we're going to be trying to tick all of those down to 0 in order to take this boss down. So there is a whole bunch of strategy in terms of hitting the miniature on the right sides and not just being adjacent to it and hitting the side that's already critically injured. So there's a lot of strategy there in the combat. Going to make things really interesting and tense when we get into the playthrough. Here we have a look at the 6 different ability card decks that come for each of the heroes in the game. All of these heroes, the Warbear, Exile, Priest, Warden, and Ranger, have 7 cards in each of the ability decks. The Witch, however, has the most with 11. Here's a close-up look at the 11 ability cards that relate to the Witch. We got things like Kinetic Reflection, Fireball, Flaming Whip, Ice Spike, all kinds of different things at the Witch's disposal. Here are the 7 different Ranger ability cards in the game. Things like Thread the Needle, Ricochet, Multi-Shot, Child of the Forest. Next up, we have the 7 ability cards for the Warbear, like Feral Blow, Toss, Ironhide, Swipe, to name a few. And here are the 7 cards for the Warden, things like Taunt, Shield Bash, Guard, and Arching Strike. And here we have a look at the 7 ability cards for the Exile, things like Primal Strike, Roaring Charge, Tree Climb, for example. And last but certainly not least is the Priest. And here are the 7 cards for the Priest, like Heavy Blow, Withdrawal, Pillar and Path, and Healing Touch. Here we have the phase cards, and these phase cards are specific to the Broodmother that comes with the Kickstarter prototype. You can see here that there's 3 different levels worth. Included inside the prototype is 5 cards for each of the levels. Again, this may change during the Kickstarter or afterwards. The next deck of cards inside the prototype are common items, and I'm not going to show you every single one of the items that are here, but I'll flip one over to give an example of what one looks like. So in this case, a gnarled branch here with one of the yellow cubes showing a passive saying +1 range on all spells. Here are some city event cards, and we know that in the final version there will be many more than what's included here in the prototype. There's also a backpack card included. This one says your free company may carry a maximum of 12 item cards in reserve and does not include items you are specifically carrying. These cards right here are an example of allies in the game. We have Dane here, Midge, Cedric, and a man-at-arms. So now that we've gone through all the characters that come inside the prototype, we've also talked about the character boards. We have also seen the ability cards that go with those characters. What you're seeing here is a stripped down version of those exact same characters included in the game, but in companion form. And you're probably wondering, why would they do that? Well, it's actually for a really good reason, and it's going to help a lot, especially for solo gamers that are concerned that they'd be controlling 4 characters at their maximum in terms of how much they need to manage, because every single party in this game that you begin with is considered the free company. That's with a name of them, and you need to field that party with 4 characters. You could go the ultra expert level route of controlling 4 fully fledged characters with all the cards for all of them and all their abilities, and that would be quite a bit to manage. However, it's completely doable, but if you wanted to streamline that solo experience, or even streamline it if you're playing with multiple players, the bonuses, they've created these, as I mentioned, stripped down versions of the characters, which have all their stats on a small card and just limited to 2 abilities. So you can still ensure that you can field a party of 4, but not have to manage 4 fully fledged out characters if you don't want to. So in other words, I could go ahead and choose 1 character board, a hero, and take the 7 ability cards that go along with that hero, and then come here and grab these 3 companions, and that would be enough to field a party called the Free Company. And here's a look at the other 3 companion characters as well as their ability cards if you want to see them for reference. We also have 2 time tokens as well as currency used inside the game, referred to as groats. And last but not least, inside the prototype, we have some AoE tiles, better known as Area of Effect tiles. And that is going to conclude the component look at Oathsworn Into the Deepwood for the upcoming Kickstarter Preview series here on the channel. I really hope this helps you get a better understanding of the components inside this prototype. And again, remembering that everything here is subject to change. Can't wait to see you guys in the playthrough. Thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, keep on rolling solo.